Our role is to exploit the music, exploit the songs that the songwriters write, but also to develop the songwriters, put them in the right rooms if they like to co-write, put them in studios to write with artists, and by all means exploit the music.
Ole Dreyer is a legendary figure in the Danish music industry. He's also the guy that got me into music. I'm very happy to have him as a mentor, but more than that, he's also an expert in publishing and synchronization, and he's had a pretty crazy career. This is going to be an interesting talk. Okay, this episode has already started nice. Me and Ole have been talking for a few minutes. We are acquaintances, and actually I owe a lot to Ole. Ole was the reason that I got into the music industry. So Ole, welcome to Sound Connections.
Thank you, Jacob. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. We haven't met face-to-face for a couple of years, but Ole, I'm just going to briefly tell this story. I was a young songwriter that was sitting in my room writing songs, and you came by my house because you and my dad used to swim together.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed you my music, and I don't know if you liked it, but you think like at least this guy's interesting. And fast forward a few years, I ended up signing with your publishing company,
mm-hmm.
and which is also why you're here, because you are a music publisher with a really interesting story. So thank you for introducing me to the music industry, but now we're also going to hear a bit about you. Ole,
Yes.
Can you explain to the audience, who are you?
Yes, who am I? I'm 61 years old, that's first of all. I started in the music business by playing in punk bands in 79. And today I have my own record label and publishing company called Nordic Music, NMS. I'm also holding the position of leader of the board or chairperson of the MPA Denmark, Music Publishers Association. And I'm a member of Coda's board. I've been at Coda's board for 15 years now. Coda is like the Danish CMO, we call them, copyright management organizations, like Tono in Norway, for instance, Teosto in Finland. So these positions are extremely valuable for a publisher.
Yeah, because so there's not a lot of people in Denmark who has more experience with publishing than you have. So that's also one of the topics we're going to dive into today. But before we dive very deep into that topic, I just want to hear about your story a bit more, from you getting into the industry and developing, because you have a really, really interesting story. But could you start from the start? You said you started in a punk band. What happened?
Yeah, okay. I went to high school and we started a few punk bands. Like, it's really do it yourself. I couldn't play, and the whole philosophy of punk was don't learn to play, just do it. So we grabbed the bass. I grabbed the bass because I've always been, fascinated by bass guitars. So I grabbed the bass and we started playing. Of course, there was one guy who could play, the guitarist. He was actually maybe too good at that time. And we formed a few bands, and punk. I was part of the whole first wave of punk in 76, 77. And the very early days of the Clash, Sex Pistols, Ramones, so on, and saw them live. And it was like a small club in Copenhagen, mostly, a little bit in Aarhus in Denmark, but 300 people, I would say the whole punk wave was in Denmark.
Okay.
So it was, everybody knew each other from gigs. And if you saw a band playing and you didn't like them, you simply went home and said, we can do better. Yeah, why not? Let's form a band. And you talk to the guy next to you and you formed a band. That's how punk bands started in Denmark. And some bands were really good, like Sods came out as Sort Sol. A couple of others were really, really good. And they became like idols. And then in 79, somebody put together a concert called Concert of the Moment, which was meant to be a festival for punk bands in Denmark. It was a guy called Eddie Haircut, who had a Danish name as well. But Eddie was like, he looked a bit like Johnny Rotten these days. And he was chaotic, but he did it. And it was in a 800 capacity venue. And it came out being an enormous event. And we all think back, that was the day that punk in fact started in Denmark, being well known. It went live on radio. And the whole thing ended up as a 3-album, not a double album, but a triple album on vinyl, obviously, in these days. And I played in 2 bands on the event, and I entered a 3rd band later. But the label releasing this kind of set me off like, okay, you can release records yourself.
Yeah.
A label called Irmgards in daily terms, but they were Irmgards zweimal neben dritten unterbringen. That was the label. It was all the way around. It was a Danish, like Stiff Records in the UK. They signed some of the first punk bands. I started hanging out at the label, became friends, played in a band with one of the founders of the label, and we released a single, and the band was called Gate Crashers. And we sold 1,500 copies of a 7-inch, which was really good. We could sell tickets in Copenhagen, so people would see us. And I really liked that, the whole philosophy. So I formed my own label as well. No problem. At my high school, a few great bands came out of that. One of them got quite famous in these days, called Kalashnikov. So I liked the business idea more, business side of music, than I was a good bass player. I always say that I was a bass owner, not a bass player. Excuse me. And that kind of set off the whole philosophy. Then I started saying, oh, people are distributing records. So I started working. Working means working, no money, no salary, for a big distribution company called SAM. Danish SAM. It was a Norwegian SAM, a Swedish SAM, S-A-M, SAM. And they were kind of a bunch of old hippies, but the punk environment could have their records released because you could walk in straight from the street. These days, releasing music was really, really difficult. Producing a record was very difficult and it costed a lot of money. So it was hard to get music released, but these people could at least help us having a distribution. So it was completely do-it-yourself. You had to fix everything. You had to send something to Sweden, to Cutting Room, I think they still exist, to do your mastering. And you would maybe 8 weeks later get a test copy of your record back. And if you liked it, they could produce it. So it could be a process for 6-12 months to make a record.
Wow.
And I liked the whole thing. We distributed great labels like Beggar's Banquet, Factory with Joy Division. We had lots of great music, fantastic music in the 80s. The Smith, New Order. And that whole, I liked that environment. And then I started thinking, why don't we export some music to the UK? Why don't all these people we helped play it again, Sam, they still exist, Piers, in Belgium. And I decided to go to London. So I brought some boxes of records and went to London and said, why don't you import some of our stuff? And some of the people, we could buy 50 copies of that one, 50 or maybe 10 of that. And it kind of, and that I love that whole thing that we could export music. Yeah. And I've been working with exports ever since, actually. So that's how it all started.
Yeah. But the story that I know you the most from is your work at PDH Music, where you signed a very famous Danish band. Could you tell a bit about that?
Yeah, I worked. I got interested into management, and I worked in London. I had one band signed. Could I tell that first? To Warner Brothers in London, called Misbehavin', an old girl group with 4 beautiful, wonderful rock girls. They were wonderful people to work with, and I still see them from time to time. Lisa Kapple, who's a famous songwriter in Danish, who run a couple of the European Song Contests. And they got signed to Warner's, and we got a very big advance, and Jeff Lynne produced a couple of tracks for them and a few others. And I was definitely, I was hit by this adventure. So I went more strong into management. I got a job at PDH, as you say, booking agency and management. I wanted them to focus on management. And I looked around for new bands, and I found a band called Inside the Whale with Markus Winter John, a songwriter in Denmark as well, in 91, I think. And they were to perform at a competition called Danish Championship of Rock, DM in rock. And there was another group performing called Decimus Lizzy, and I was like blown away. They were absolutely fantastic. The same were another band called Kashmir. They were the 2 I really liked beside from Inside the Whale. And I signed Decimus Lizzy on management, decided they're going to be good together with Inside the Whale. And the whole thing exploded after they won that competition. It completely took off. They won the release of a 4-track EP on a CD, and it got power played on national radio. And it was rock. It was the Danish Nirvana, you could say. It was guitar-based grunge, but they were not as hard or tough or far out as Nirvana or Pearl Jam, for that sake. But they had great melodies. You could hear that they were big Beatles fans, and I got them signed to EMI Records because the singer Tim Christensen was a big Beatles fan, and he wanted to be released on Parlophone, which EMI owned. So it was kind of no competition for all the others. They thought so. But, and Dizzy Miss Lizzy, we put together a wonderful strategy, and that's the first time I worked with a major label. And we had a strategy of keeping them a little secret, even though they sold 80,000 albums within the first couple of weeks. And we canceled the whole tour and set up in bigger venues, and it was really, the snowball started rolling for that whole wave of great bands like Kashmir and Psyched Up Janis and a couple of other, Passion Orange.
You've got an amazing career, and I think we needed at least 2 or 3 episodes in order to cover everything. So, because I've known you for a while, and it's always interesting talking to you because the amount of things you've done. So we'll skip over a few things, even though they're extremely interesting.
Fine, it was very detailed, I know, but it's I love this whole idea of do it yourself. That's what I really like, and I like to walk on new ground all the time. To say, okay, nobody's done this before. That sounds like an amazing idea, and I know you're similar to this, Jacob.
Yeah, and I think that's also why I really consider you a mentor. So I think that's also because I do see a lot of myself in the way that you've worked. But fast forwarding quite a few years, you ended up with EMI. Yeah. In a publishing position.
Yeah, in '99. Yeah, 1999.
Could you explain first and foremost for everyone who doesn't know, what is publishing?
Publishing is we get a share of the songwriter's copyrights, and we get that share for a certain period, which is in the agreement. It can be life of copyright, it can be 1 year, it can be anything really. But we are the business partner of the songwriter, I would say. Our role is to exploit the music, exploit the songs that the songwriters write, but also to develop the songwriters, put them in the right rooms if they like to co-write, put them in studios to write with artists, and by all means exploit the music. It's my former boss, Marty Bandier, who's one of the most legendary publishers in the world of music, told me once, it's a penny business, Ole. It's a penny business. It's all the little money we collect that become the big fortune. Yeah. And he's completely right about that. Of course, there's big chunks of money coming in, but it's about thinking, how can I exploit the music all the time? Of course, we can't think of a catalog like EMI. They probably got millions of songs. You can't think of all songs at one time, but you can think of structures, or there's always a gem hidden somewhere. All publishers always got a great song in their little secret stash somewhere that hasn't been a hit yet, but we still think it's a great hit. And that's the nature of the publisher, that we don't mind songs are old. They don't have to be new, like on the record side or live. You need to have hits, you need to have proven hits, or you need to have the right sound. The sound of today has always been the big aim for them to reach the record labels, whereby the publishers, we have the little gem of a song, and it can be produced in all kinds of ways. It can be, arranged, or it can have a different sound. It can be played as an electronic version. It can be played with a full orchestra or just a 3-piece band, acoustic versions. The same song can be great in many ways. And the publisher's role is to think like that all the time. Can we exploit this song somehow?
Yeah. And one of the big parts of publishing, at least, is the revenue is also synchronization, which is very closely tied between the intersection between publishing and master rights. Can you also, for the listeners, explain a bit what that is?
Synchronization is about 1/3 of the income for publishers globally. And synchronization is music to pictures. It's synchronized with pictures. The music, that's where the name comes from. And pictures can be a movie, a theater play. It can be an opera. It can be anything. TV series is very big for synchronization, and probably most known is the commercials. All commercials got music in them, better or better, and it worse. And synchronization is a certain market because there's a whole chain. The food chain is pretty long to get to the product. You have to know a lot of people to get a synchronization.
Yeah,
you have to make sure that the music is right for synchronization. But what is right for synchronization as long as you don't know the product? So you have to have supervisors who explain to you what the music is going to be like in a TV series. Okay, we're looking for 1960s style music and blah, blah, blah. And we all know great films with great music in them. And it's my role to push that music we got in our catalog to these people who decide what's going to be in a movie. Think of Quentin Tarantino, for instance. Music is such an important role in his movies. And that takes a good supervisor.
Yeah.
But also a good publisher to suggest this art music to the supervisor. So that's synchronization. It's just another ball game. It's about knowing music, knowing your catalog.
Yeah, because it's also a complicated industry. The way that I see it, and I might be wrong, is I sort of picture the synchronization industry or music supervision role as something in between the music industry and the film and TV and advertising industry. And it's not really the music industry exclusively. So it's kind of like it's different kind of people and it's different things. Actually, the episode that's released right before this one is with Einar Helte from Ames API, who also works within music supervision.
Yes, I know Einar. Yes.
Yeah. So and they also have a lot of thoughts about where this is moving, but obviously publishing and synchronization has changed over the years. Could you explain a bit how was it 25 years ago?
Yeah.
And how is it now, and what's the change that's been there?
I don't think it changed that much because the core is the song. You need a song, and there's no publisher without a song, and there's no music business without the song. This is the first right. The songwriters can always say yes or no to a recording. So I think it's essential to have publishers to communicate between songwriters and the labels. And then the role has always been to exploit the music. Back in the day, it must have been 30s, 40s, 50s, there were song factories all over the world, especially in New York, especially in Nashville, where they had co-writes like we do today. They have little studios, and people would go, like the Brill Building, which you should Google. People would go in there and write songs together, like we do today. We have much better studios. We have the freedom of being able to write on a laptop. We can travel with our laptop and write songs. That's amazing. We don't even need to travel. We can do it online. During COVID, people could still work as songwriters. They could not work as artists because there was no venues. There was hardly impossible to travel. So publishing is still the core business is songwriting, and we need to exploit that. The media has changed, but the platforms, that's on the record side, I think. They changed from in my lifetime, it's like from cassette, vinyl, it changed to CD, and now it's streaming with a little bit of vinyl. But it doesn't really matter to a publisher because we have to make sure, and we have to ensure that we get a cut or something is paid for the copyright.
Yeah.
No matter the media, if it's radio, TV, if it's records, there should be paid some money for the copyright, which means to the songwriter, and we get a share of that. So it has changed a bit, but not that much. Of course, lots of structures has changed. Synchronization is playing a bigger and bigger role. But even when I started in publishing in '99, synchronization was a big thing. It just happened in America and a little bit in the UK. And it took me a couple of years to understand what it was really. But when I got into it, we got some great things for EMI writers in Denmark, in the US, so it's still business. The business is still selling songs to the right artists, to the right platforms. Seeking for opportunities.
Yeah, but also the publishing world is, I would say, is a bit difficult and funny. Like you and me, we co-own a company together with a few other people that's called Mantic Music Group. And what I've realized over the last 5 years is the finances around publishing is, in my interpretation, about scale or about, big success, but everything beyond that is quite difficult. So building a career as a songwriter, having like medium-sized songs or even like larger songs on Danish radio or Nordic radio doesn't necessarily amount to a lot or to sustain a living. So what is your take on the economics around publishing from a creator side?
Yeah, it's a penny business. I must stress again. It's a penny business, and you have to spread out your business to lots of different platforms, and unless you got that wonderful number one hit worldwide that will last forever, like all the classics we know, it's a struggle. You have to fight to get the next hit. You have to fight to be better as a songwriter. You have to seek opportunities. I'm here to help the songwriters to seek opportunities. Many of the people we work with in Mantic or in NMS, they probably heard about Sync because it's been talk of town for a couple of years, but they don't really know what it is and how difficult it is to work with that. But I still see big opportunities as songwriters, but it's harder and harder to export. That's one of the big changes for the past couple of years. That export is getting harder and harder.
What do you mean by that?
I saw a report by Will Page, and I had a discussion with him the other day at a conference, that we see something he calls localization, he calls it, which means that local or domestic hits kind of rule the charts in every country, which means that in Denmark, 10 out of 10 songs, maybe 90 out of 100 of the top 100 of last year was with Danish lyrics. That is no window for an export or an import from abroad. And that picture is seen all over Europe and the Western world. It's different in Korea, for instance. Songwriters can still write songs over there, but the artists need to be local. So songwriters can still export. They can write songs in the US for US hits, but creating big global hits is very, very difficult because for some reason, maybe after the pandemic, I don't know, people are more and more looking towards the local artists with native language. That's a big change.
Yep.
And I don't really like it, but I'm not a nationalist, as you can hear. I think that gives a lot of opportunities for songwriters. We need to nurse them, and they have to understand the market. I don't think songwriters necessarily know the market, but we are here to explain it to them. Say, okay, we can bring your songs over here. We see opportunities over here that might fit with you. And that can be in any aspect of the business. It can also be in synchronization. Like I haven't heard the podcast with Einar yet, but I guess he talked a lot about the music has to be right in his format for TV and commercials, which he's very good in exploiting music for. But I also the part of the business I'm in, the songwriter need a name. They should be known, and that's very important for me. And they should get a piece of the cake no matter what their music is used for.
That makes sense. And one of the things about publishing, which is also really complex, is the collection part of it, because that must also be something you guys work on a board level in some of the positions you do, because the very complex infrastructures on a global level for collecting money. Could you describe a bit what is collecting money and what are the problems there are in that?
Collecting money is, for instance, every time a song is played on the radio, radio will pay a certain amount per second, and that's an agreement they make with a PRO like Coda, PRS in the UK, BMI, ASCAP in the US, so on. And that is every time music is played on radio, on TV, in commercials, live. Every time a record is printed, and that's also including printed as a stream. That is also a mechanical print for some reason, that you make a file. But that is the fact. Every time they have to have a license from a PRO like Coda, and Coda will issue licensing according to how much money they make, and it's very complicated, and there's millions of different licensing. So that's collection, and all this money go into Coda, and somebody got to find all the money for the songwriters. Coda will do that automatically, but sometimes they make mistakes. Things got mixed up. Names are spelled wrong. Song titles are spelled wrong. There's probably millions of songs with the same title, something like "I Love You," "I Miss You," something like that. "Great Summer Day," whatever. And these songs should not be mixed up when it comes to payment. I want my money. You want your money for your songs. So somebody got to check that. And that is the publisher's role. He will check Coda, see if everything is calculated correctly, see if there's income. If you, for instance, make music for a film, it's a long way from, for instance, Italy to Denmark, that you get your payment for your 30 seconds of a song in a TV series in Italy. And the publisher will make sure you get your money. There's lots of instruments to find the money for you. But still, that is the publisher's role. But I cannot be in Italy. I cannot be in Korea all the time. So I need people to work with. So I make agreement with other publishers. We call them sub-publishers. They look after my rights in their territory. I could look after other people's rights in Denmark, being a sub-publisher. I'm not, but other people are. And that's the whole structure of publishing. We help each other. Of course, we get a revenue, and we get some commission, and we seek money all the time. It's a constant search. Whenever I talk to Coda, there's like, oh, something is missing here. And being a board member, my role is also to ensure that Coda is doing the best business for the songwriters and publishers. We get the highest tariffs from TV, radio, and so on. We issue license to new medias. It took us 8 years to license YouTube. They were actually a piracy service until they were licensed. YouTube ended up doing a lockout of Danish songwriters. That's something that Coda stood up against for all the songwriters in the world, not just the Danish. It took us, I think, 2 years to issue a license to iTunes. You could not have iTunes in Denmark in the early days. Spotify took us more than 1 year because we wanted the best possible tariff for the songwriters. Other countries were eager to issue a license, like Sweden, for instance, because Spotify is invented over there. So that's all the collection, Imagine how much little details, how much data there is from a streaming service like Spotify coming in all the time. It's really little money. But all in all, collected together, it's a lot of money. And songwriters, there's no way songwriters can get their own money. So they need to stand together in what we call collective licensing or collective administration like Coda. It is so essential to understand that these are instruments for the songwriters. And I could add that I'm really happy to be at Coda because they see songwriters and publishers as customers and clients. Yeah. They don't see us as members, as many other societies do.
That makes
Coda
sense.
is a service. And that's what we should do. Collect money the best way you can do it, at the highest tariffs, at the smallest amount of administration. That's what I want as a publisher. On the songwriters.
But there's also a lot of things happening right now, and we wrote briefly about it, but there's a lot of AI happening right now, and especially within the AI-generated music that's on its way. And you're also vocal about the financial aspect of that. Could you tell a bit about what are your worries about AI generated music, and how's that going to affect songwriters and publishers?
Yeah, I must say I'm not against AI. Some people think we should stop it. No way. I think AI is a great tool. We use AI in our daily business. We use it for searching for the right music for synchronization. That's very important to say. I use it for like ChatGPT, for writing a text, get inspired by something. What is wrong with it is that they started doing a copyright infringement when they used all music to get inspired by. You can't do that without a license in my world. You simply need a license before you start building something commercial, as AI is, because you have to ensure that you have a license. And it's actually not that hard to get a license, because we have collective licensing like Coda. They could issue licensing for Europe, for instance. So that is wrong. They haven't got a license for the material they used. And now they say, it's really hard to reset. Yeah, but probably you have to. Yeah, that's going to be expensive. Yeah, but you made the mistake. I didn't. Yeah. I was not asked, did I want my music? One of the tricky parts of AI is, what about all the songwriters that have the full right in any law in the world to say no to have their music used for a certain thing? That is going to be the big question mark in AI, I think. We all heard wonderful, funny versions of music where they mix together lyrics and vocals and musicians like the one we heard at our last seminar, Johnny Cash doing Barbie Girl, which is fantastic. But it's illegal. You can't do it without asking the people involved in writing the song, the artist, the name. You can't do that in the real world. And the real world is the internet. AI is part of the real world. Yeah. That's the tricky part. We have to solve that. And I'm sure some of the major players in the world, say the three major companies, Warner, Universal, and Sony, they're working on it, I'm sure, at the moment. Whether it's going to be licensing song by song, I don't think so. It will be some kind of the licensing we use for what we call background music, but it's a huge chunk of background music, I must say, they used. But background music is music in shops and shopping centers and shopping malls and so on. They pay a certain amount of money, but nobody identifies each song. So the money paid out of the collective licensing, it's getting a little complicated already, I'm sorry. But
no, that's good.
It's based on other factors.
Yeah.
We have to give some money to the most popular songs, probably. Yeah. And that is the problem. Yeah. And they got to be willing to pay for it. They got to be willing to pay for it, accounting the users, accounting the use of music. Is music an important role for AI services? For some, yes. For some, not. And that's always a struggle. It's nothing new, really. Think about, I mentioned YouTube, but TikTok, Twitch. We just issued a license for Twitch. There's been a big debate with them. I know with lots of PROs, they had some trouble with Twitch because they live from donations. And musicians should get a part of the donation because music is used to create the product.
Yeah,
but they don't see it that way. They see it as donations, tax-free, black money. It's probably the American way of looking at tips. As you know, in Denmark, even tips are taxed here. So we also have to pay for the music.
Yeah.
So it's but that's the tricky part, and we are up against some of the big tech corporations in the world, and I know they are extremely powerful. And you have to judge every time you see a statement from any of the tech companies. It's very political, and they have a goal with it. And they spend more money than the music business and film business altogether on lobbying in EU or Washington or Beijing. Or they spend more money on lobbying than we can never reach the amount of money they spend. So they are extremely powerful. And I don't want to stop them. I just want my fair piece of the cake, really.
That makes sense. But it also speaks into the complexity of publishing. And, just in this conversation, we've covered like 4 or 5 super complex areas. And there's no school degree that's called Bachelor's in Music Publishing. How did you learn publishing, and how would you recommend new people coming into publishing to learn about it?
I'm happy to say that it's much easier today than it was before.
Yeah.
I worked together with a guy in London who was a great publisher, who worked for a company called Intersong, became Chappell Intersong, became Warner Chappell, one of the great publishers in the world today. And I learned a lot from him, really. He told me what a contract was and blah, blah. But the first time I saw a publishing contract, I didn't know anything about it. And I have to give advice to an artist, and it was a rather big one in London. And I was really like, I have to read this. And I didn't understand a word of it. So I had to see lawyers. I spent a lot of money on lawyers to explain what is this about. So it's learning it the really, really hard way, I must say. Yeah. But I realized that the guy I met in London, Chas, he's the guy who found U2, by the way. He produced their first 2 singles. He learned me a lot about the whole music business and how publishing could be used for songwriters, but also for artists, to be another tool beside of the record labels, maybe to find the right record label you could have a publisher. Same thing happened with Dizzy Miss Lizzy, the Danish rock band I managed. They had a release in Japan that was truly a publisher's work. He saw a window with some DJ on a radio station, and he power played it. So they entered at number 1 in Japan when their album was released, because the publisher did their homework. Yeah. So that's how I learned it, really. I worked with great people, and they told me, what is this about? And then I got this job at EMI, and I was like, I would say it takes 3 to 5 years to become a great publisher. And the whole EMI system, there were some amazing people who I owe a lot, really. And one of them is Guy Mood, who's now the CEO of Warner Bros., Warner Chappell. Marty Bangieri mentioned before. It's like great people who took the time to explain to me how publishing could work. Yeah. And I wanted the songwriters we signed to be exploited worldwide. So I had to talk to other publishers. Then you learn the lingo a bit, I would say.
Is that the same way you need to do today? Is you need to sort of
no, luckily there's something called the internet, something called Google. You can actually learn a lot. You can learn, I don't do lectures really, but I'm invited to do 1 or 2 hour sessions at some of conservatories here at the Songwriter School. I'm just planning a visit there in November, and to tell what I do. And then lots of the younger people will do all the practicalities. How do we work with the songwriters and blah, blah, blah. I can do like the structures of the business. But people think it's really complicated. But I see that there's always a couple who get addicted to say, hey, that's interesting. That is really interesting. And there are some books to read as well. There are some books. But the problem is often that there's a big, big difference between US, UK, and Danish law, and therefore Danish publishing. Yeah. So the best way to do it is get educated, not necessarily in music, I think, but you could be educated in business. You can learn some structures about how to develop a new business, and then you can learn music publishing. Not easily, but more easy, I think. I'm educated as a geographer, and in '85 I have a bachelor and a master in communications which is like 10 years old. But it's like you have to do your homework, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of reading and understanding, talking to people, talk to other publishers. And I'm happy that young people call me when they study business, when they study at conservatories. They study music management. They give me a call. They come, hey, could you spend 2 hours, learn me a little bit about this? And I'm happy to do so. It's not overwhelming, but yeah. And I think that's the way to do it. You work for 3 months, 6 months as a helping hand in a publishing company. That's how I learned the music business.
Yeah.
That's how you learn the music business, probably. Yeah,
that's how I learned it. There's really no like direct way to study it, but I also, I worked with you and NMS as an intern for some time, and then I sort of did my own projects while also interning. It was a really weird intern position because it wasn't really, but I helped out and learned a lot from it.
But internships are a great way to learn, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's the best way. But Ole, you've had a really interesting career, and I'll just touch points on a few of them. Like you've started a very legendary venue in Copenhagen called Rust. You've had a restaurant. There's so many things you've done. Are you going to jump on more projects in the future?
I have no plans really, but you never know. I'm always open for adventure, really.
Yeah.
I am 61 years old, and retirement. For some reason, I can see it's going to happen within the next 10 years. I never thought about it really, but but I still love both having my own company. I enjoy having a lot of influence in politics. I think that's really interesting. Mm-hmm. And on politics, we have to get some structures for AI to develop. Yeah. But also in my own business, we have to develop the business so it can still be a business in the world of AI, because there's no doubt that it's going to happen. The customers want it, so it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I don't want to. I don't have any ideas of starting a new company or something. No way.
No, but
really,
there's a lot of challenges in the music industry that you'll probably fight over the next 10 years.
Yes.
Great, Ole. This was a really good talk, and thank you for sharing a bit about your story and some touching base on most like high level aspects of publishing. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about, just because I really see a lot of things happening there in the future when it comes to collection and emerging markets. It's like this, the same with the whole music industry. It's a part that's growing and becoming more lucrative. Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ole. I really hope we can spend some time together at one point. Again, as I said at the start,
look forward to see you again.
Yes, as I said at the start, you have been my entry into the music industry, and I have promised you once, and I tried to.
I didn't mention Jakob, but please.
I promised you once that one day I will make you rich. That's my promise to you when you introduced me to the music industry. I haven't figured out how yet.
No. But I'm open for business. And I can move to Norway, no problem really.
Okay, good. We'll figure out how it goes, but let's see.
Sure.
But thank you so much, Ole. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for being a part of Sound Connections.
Likewise. Great seeing you again.